It's 3 minutes after 10. A very good morning to you. I don't do this perhaps as often as I should, but I do it more than I used to. What on earth is he talking about? You're thinking, is he allowed to behave like that in a studio? I'm referring to conversations about the climate crisis, which in a completely honest universe, a completely objective universe, a universe where we didn't reflect upon how we feel about things, but simply reported what we should care most about, we would probably be discussing every day. But we don't. And I want to know why. The world is on track for a, quote, hellish 3 degrees centigrade of global heating, the United Nations has warned, before the crucial COP28 climate summit that begins next week in the United Arab Emirates. It also looks at the actions, or we will also look at the actions of the wealthiest people on the planet when it comes to things like holidays and meals out, contributing to a carbon footprint that dwarfs that of less wealthy people. I just list the stuff that's popped into my head this week. There's also a report, I think it was CNN, certainly one big broadcaster has sort of closed down its climate change desk. I don't know whether that's because they're elevating it and promoting it to a higher status, but it certainly looks as though they're demoting it as an area of news. And if you're doing it according to clicks, this is the maddest thing, I think, about my profession's relationship with climate change. It doesn't sell tickets. It simply doesn't put bums on seats. It doesn't collect clicks. I presume you've noticed how cynical this profession has become, the pursuit of clicks. We're all right because we generally get clicks on this programme for doing the work of the good and the just, even if it sometimes involves beating up people who are a bit unpleasant or a bit slow on the uptake. But the pursuit of clicks, you know, I could, if I was prioritising social media clicks over integrity, honesty, and the most basic journalistic principles, then you could make a list right now of the kind of people I'd be inviting onto the programme. You don't need me to tell you who does that, who actually behaves in a completely unprincipled way in the desperate pursuit of clicks by getting people onto their programmes who, frankly, shouldn't really have any platform at all in polite society or in public. Look where it's led us. Look, we're treating people like Donald Trump and Nigel Farage as if they're honest contributors to public discourse. Look where it's left us. So my industry pursues clicks. And the climate doesn't deliver them, which is really, really odd, because you can terrify somebody. You know, your Auntie Doris is... I've stopped using Doris after a very valid complaint from an actual Doris. I've stopped using Auntie Doris's Facebook page as a figure of speech. I'll stick with Uncle Keith's Facebook page. You know how easy it is to terrify and enrage people about things that aren't actually happening. You know, the immigrants who are going to steal your job and your biscuits, whatever it may be, the unemployed, disabled people who are responsible for the country's economic woes, the single mothers who, if only we could get rid of them, we'd all be really rich, like lottery winners. You know how easy it is, right? The woke mob. Can't name any members of it, but down with that sort of thing. It's so easy to enrage and enfeeble people with false information. And yet, the true information, the factual information... I'm just going to open Idiot's Corner a bit earlier this morning. Andy's been in touch. He says, there is no climate emergency. It's the biggest hoax of all time. Thank God the majority knows this is a hoax. Talk to people outside your bubble, and I am telling the truth. People do not believe there is an emergency. You know, until Galileo came along, people didn't believe that the Earth revolved around the sun. They thought it was the other way around. Andy would have been texting then about how it's a massive hoax. Heliocentrism is just a massive hoax. Everybody knows. Get out of your bubble. Speak to people who actually have boiled ham between their ears, and they will tell you what's real. I mean, it's just such an odd position to take, and it is irrelevant to the conversation that I'm having. So to be absolutely clear, at 8 minutes after 10, and apologies in advance for the arrogance, I'm not talking to idiots like Andy today. Idiot's Corner exists for a reason, and today it's like a microchip activated cat flap. So Andy's got a little chip in his head, and he can get into the cat flap, he can get through it, but he can't get out again. So Idiot's Corner today has a one-way entrance and no exit. I'm not interested in talking to idiots about this. I'm interested in talking to people who know that they should care more, but don't know why they don't. Actually, that excludes people who do care enough. Because the other story that I haven't mentioned yet involves the United Nations complaining about the jailing, the severity of the sentences handed down to a pair of climate change protesters, in this case, Just Stop Oil protesters. Rishi Sunak, you can read this story, you could almost write it yourself. Rishi Sunak has rejected claims from the United Nations that lengthy jail sentences for climate activists could stifle free speech in the UK. Rishi Sunak is an idiot. He can go and join Andy behind the cat flap. Because, of course, lengthy jail sentences will stifle free speech. Whether you think that's a good thing or not is moot. If you're going to be sent to jail for 3 years for climbing up a bridge, scaling the Dartford crossing, then the people behind you are less likely to do it. They will become martyrs, some of them. They will embrace the opportunity of incarceration because it proves the strength of their principles. Or perhaps it feeds an attention-seeking gene. But the bottom line is, if I was minded to protest about climate change in a really noticeable way, and you have to do increasingly impactful things to get noticed, that's another mad thing about my profession. How many times have you heard people who never talk about the climate change complaining about the fact that they're talking about it today because people have undertaken a mode of protest that attracts the sort of attention that peaceful protest never does? Oh, it's outrageous, they're blocking the roads. I've never talked about climate change in a level-headed way, but today I'm going to get really cross about the people who are protesting against it or trying to draw attention to it. So it works. And if you jail people for 3 years for doing things that work, they become less likely to do it, I think. So, of course, it's stifling free speech. And, of course, Rishi Sunak has rejected claims. Perhaps they could pass a law, like the Rwanda legislation that they're planning. Just pass a law to make the things that you want to be true superficially true. Rishi Sunak's latest bill is designed to make him 6'4". I don't know if you've seen this. Have you seen this? He's passing a bill. Parliament is going to vote on how tall Rishi Sunak is. And the Conservative government is putting forward a proposal that Rishi Sunak is actually 6'4". They're expecting it to pass as a 3-line whip, and come tea time tomorrow, Rishi Sunak will officially and legally and constitutionally be 6'4". And Rwanda will be a safe country. And jailing people for protesting against climate change will not stifle their freedom of speech. All of those things will become true by 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock tomorrow. Who even knows what time it will be? Because they're going to pass another law. We're going to throw away all the clocks. We're going to call it Rishi time. It's 4:00 Rishi. It's Rishi o'clock. Get rid of the clocks. Get rid of the time. Get rid of everything that you know to be true and replace it with things that you know to be false, but you are compelled and required to insist that they are true. Rishi Sunak is 6'4", and Rwanda is a safe country. And there's no such thing as climate change, just to keep an eye on old Andy there in Idiot's Corner. All right, mate. Do you want a biscuit? There you go. And then we come to me, as we always do, and I am aware of that, and I sense that it may be slightly irritating sometimes, but I think today I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't care enough. I still don't care enough. I say that, and I feel my... I feel my... I'm not going to say, but it's not my buttocks are clenching. Nobody wants to know that. I just feel a sort of sense of shame kick in. I don't want to tell you this. Actually, I still don't care enough. I still don't care enough. And I don't know why, because I'm not thick. I understand. I'm not Andy. I know that if 90-odd% of the world's scientists can prove something to be true, then it's true. I'm not dangerous. I'm not sticking my head in the sand. I've made changes in my own life, not big ones, but, well, quite big ones, but not earth-shattering ones. I used to get a car to work every day. I used to be driven to work every day, as is befitting of a broadcaster of my status and reputation and renown. Now I don't. I get a bus and a train, a bus and a tube to work. In fact, I got a bus earlier this week that had my own face on the side. Do you know that if you have your face on the side of a bus, there is absolutely no special treatment as a passenger when you get on it? So people don't even notice. How annoyed with me would you be if I told you that I wanted to tell other people at the bus stop? Because I travel quite incognito. I like to wear a big hat, a nice woolly hat, and sometimes have my hood up. But I'm standing at the bus stop, and the bus comes to a halt by the bus stop, and there's my face on the side of the bus. I think people would find that quite amusing if I were to go to you. If you were standing next to a bloke at the bus stop, right, and he kind of nudged you gently and said, look, and then smiled at you in a slightly vacant way, you'd be quite... and it's a notable moment, right? There's a bloke, I don't believe it. There's a bloke on the side of a bus and I'm standing next to him at the bus stop. That's just interesting, right? But I don't do it because I'm on this constant quest to be less conceited. And I mention that because today I am making it all about me. I don't know why I don't care more. I don't know why I don't care more. So, Sunak's rejecting claims that prison sentences for exercising free speech stifle free speech. The world is facing a 3-degree rise in climate heating. This is the mad stuff, by the way. This is the Don't Look Up stuff, that brilliant Leonardo DiCaprio film. This is the point where, you know, records are being obliterated. Heat waves, floods. I don't know if you saw the Taylor Swift story from Brazil earlier this week. One poor woman died. Taylor Swift herself appeared to be short of breath on stage in Rio de Janeiro. The costs, financial and logistical, of calling off a concert because you're in the middle of an apocalyptic heat wave are so high that it went ahead. There is, says the executive director of the United Nations Agency, the Environment Programme, there is no person or economy left on the planet untouched by climate change. So we need to stop setting unwanted records on emissions, temperature and extreme weather. So that's 2 stories. Sunak rejects the claim that getting jailed for exercising your free speech about climate change might stifle free speech in the future. The United Nations warns of a hellish increase in climate heating. The CNN, I think it's CNN, forgive me if I've misremembered that, CNN are closing down their climate change desk because even when you're in the business of reporting reality, some elements of reality just don't sell. I'm going to circle back to that point, I suspect. They just don't sell. It proves my point. I have failed, in many ways, to make this topic as urgent and as interesting as it should be. And I don't understand why I've failed. I am quite good at this. I can make you care about things by 10:30 that you didn't care about at 10 o'clock. I can make you care less about things if somebody else has spent the morning encouraging you to be hateful towards the unemployed or the disabled or foreigners or refugees. Then by 10:30, I can lance that boil. I can remove the pus that has been injected into your bloodstream by right-wing media. I'm quite good at that, but I can't do this. I can't do this. Maybe it's because the richest 1% of humanity is responsible for more carbon emissions than the poorest 66%. And I'm in the 1%. I don't know why. And nor do you. But I'm going to ask you anyway. Why don't I care more? Why don't I care enough? Why do I read about an international broadcaster shutting down its climate change desk and think, yeah, fair enough. I know why they've done that. Why aren't I climbing the walls, or indeed the Dartford crossing, in exasperation and outrage? Why am I tempted, as the metaphorical meteor makes its way towards our planet, why am I tempted not to look up anymore? Why is that? It's nothing to do, just to save you tuppence ringing in, it's nothing to do, I don't believe, with the secretly funded lobby dedicated to promoting the interests of fossil fuels and denying the existence of climate change. My new book nearly ended. It's the CNBC desk. Thank you, Venky, not the CNN desk. But same point. I mean, it is absolutely remarkable to think that they've shut it down. Anyway, it's 18 after 10, so hold that thought. Why? Why don't I care enough? And by all the laws of logic, and by almost every other example in my own life, I should be halfway up the Dartford crossing at the moment. I should be screaming from the rooftops. I should be gluing myself to the road outside Charing Cross Station. So why aren't I? I know how bad things are. And yet, even with this platform that I have the privilege of sharing with you every single day, I just, it's like the dots are not connected on anything like the scale that they should be. Why not? James is in Exeter to kick things off. James, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James. I think there's a number of points here. I think, first of all, the mainstream media are failing in their duty to report the seriousness of the crisis to their viewers, readers and listeners.
Yes, true. Well, that's chicken and egg in a way, isn't it? Because I'm sitting here as a member of the mainstream media telling you that I don't do enough, but I know that I should do more. But don't forget the cold, hard, cynical calculation that it doesn't... I mean, you know, Yaman's in charge of the clips today. He'll put something up. I'll tell you what he sent me. He sent me a little clip of me saying, why don't I care enough? And it won't come close to being the biggest seller of the week. So it's chicken and egg. It's not the media's fault. It's your fault for not caring enough.
Yeah, exactly. I spent time in prison. I'm a Paralympic athlete. I climbed on top of a plane and glued myself to the top of a city airport back in 1929 as part of an Extinction Rebellion protest.
Crikey.
I went to prison for that. I was given a year's sentence at Wandsworth. It was overturned by the Court of Appeal. But I received about 2,000 items of correspondence during my time in prison. And I'm registered blind. The prison wouldn't allow me my glasses to read the items of mail, so my cellmate did it for me.
You're James Brown.
Yes. So it was a lot of reading. But the real strong message that came through from a vast majority of those letters and emails and so on was that people just feel they don't know what to do. They feel powerless, even with the full awareness of the severity of the crisis. They just feel that they can't do anything. They feel impotent. And, you know, the question of, well, does climbing the Dartford Bridge or gluing yourself to the roof of a plane help? The fact is we don't know, and we have to be comfortable and reconcile ourselves with that uncertainty. And I wrote about this when I was in prison, and, you know, it's we just don't know. But
what happened to you? What happened to you? Because you're, let me just do the calculation. You're about 61 now.
59.
59. It says here you were 57 in 2019. You need to get your publicist onto this, unless you manage to slow down time.
Let's not quibble over the little details.
No, I know. But what happened to you? Because when you were 17 and 27 and 30, what happened? Why did you become the bloke that glued himself to a plane?
I was blissfully unaware of the crisis until my daughter sat me down and told me about the birds and the bees, literally.
Yeah.
She told me about the severity of the crisis. She was studying geography and environment at university at the time. And I met her one day for coffee, and I just knew everything wasn't right. And she told me the extent of the crisis. And I was just so unaware.
What did she think? And this is an important question. It's not just me being gossipy. What did she think when you glued yourself to a plane and got sent to jail? Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth.
Mixed feelings. I mean, those who were watching the live stream thought I might die, including my wife.
Yikes.
It was. I mean, it was a risky thing to do. And my daughter, I guess she understands, and I would say to an extent follows the sort of the theory of change that says that you know, all the big societal changes that have happened throughout history have happened as a result of non-violent direct action. So, you know, she understands the theory of change, but of course she was terrified to see what I was doing, and you know, it was pretty inevitable that a prison sentence was on the cards.
That's the interesting point in a way, isn't it? Is that she was your inspiration to go further than she wanted you to go.
Yeah, maybe that's what.
So that's the crux. That's the pivot of this conversation. Why do you care enough?
Yeah.
Or so much when even your daughter, who cares as much but won't act as impactfully?
Well, she did act. She and I were amongst two of the first people to step onto the bridges when Extinction Rebellion launched at the end of 2018. We walked arm in arm in absolute tears. We didn't want to be doing that.
There's so little space between you and ambivalence, isn't there? People are either signed up like you are, or idiots denying science, and that's a tiny minority with a hugely disproportionate voice. But most people, I believe, recognise the reality of what you're describing, and yet are a million miles away from following you down the path you've gone down. That's the bit I don't understand.
I don't understand it, and but I think that maybe an element of it is that they simply don't know what they can do. They look at the activists and say, well, are those guys doing the right thing? Yeah. You know, it's not an easy life. You know, I felt absolutely full of shame when I was convicted.
Yes.
And it's a real tough path to follow, and not everybody does it. And the other thing that people wrote to me about when I was in prison was to acknowledge what they saw as courage in me. And I mean, I've spent a lifetime as an athlete, and I've done a lot of risky things, so I didn't see climbing on a plane as being risky, or courageous. I just saw it was something that had to be done. So, yeah, I think there's those two elements to it, probably.
And there it is. And it's worth mentioning, because we talked about this yesterday in the context of COVID policy, that the cost-benefit analysis, James gets sent to jail for costing an airline an estimated £40,000. And he sees himself as correctly trying to draw attention to an apocalyptic existential crisis that humanity is facing. But it cost an airline £40,000, so he got sent to jail. Somewhere in that story is perhaps the beginning of an answer to the question of why we don't care more, the disproportionate nature of coverage and reporting, but it's not the whole answer. James, take care. Rachel's in Kendal, in Cumbria.
Hi,
Rachel,
James.
hello. What would you like to say?
How are you doing? It was amazing to hear from James, and I really, what he says really resonates with me, because I've been involved with XR and a little bit of JSO, but never been arrested, never put myself in that position, and I am so scared of it. Yes. I know that the climate change and the climate disaster that is coming closer to us every day. We're going to hit. We've hit 1.5. We're going to hit 2 degrees. Our future, the future of my children, are really tenuous. And yet every day I go to work, and yet every day I don't glue myself to things, and yet every day I don't act. And I'm a psychologist, and I think it's because I am protecting my brain by
Go on, tell me more.
Thinking about the instant moment. So tomorrow, I need to get my kids to school. I need to make sure that they have food on the table tomorrow. I'm not thinking about in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. We're instant gratification. Humans live day to day. We're not very good at thinking long term at all. And capitalism, that's a huge factor. I'm worried about how much money I earn, and if I'm going to be able to pay my mortgage and things like that. And if I go to prison, then what happens? Will I be thrown out of
I'm not necessarily
all these kind of things.
asking why we aren't all gluing ourselves to planes. And I don't think you're in the category of not caring enough. You do care enough. You don't, but you don't think you do enough. That's a different problem from mine.
No.
I don't care enough.
You don't care enough. Why don't you care enough?
Well, hang on a minute. It's my phone in. That's the question I've been asking since 10 o'clock this morning, Rachel. And logically, I do. It's the difference between head and heart. Intellectually, I do. Emotionally, I don't. Why is that?
It's a disconnect, isn't it? You're not really connecting with the information you're given. You're protecting your own emotions. Maybe you can't deal with the emotions that are involved.
Could be that. That speaks a psychologist. Whereas you do know and you do care, but you don't do enough about it for similar reasons of self-protection.
Yeah, and we need strong leadership to move us forward with this. We can't have the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak pull back on all of these things that we need to move forward on and damage any movement that's been made. We need to have a focus on the future of Britain and the future of the world and the future of all the species and the ecosystems that are going to be damaged by this climate disaster that's coming towards us so quickly. We all need to act, and we all need to tune into that and actually shout, but we need to feel that we're going to be listened to, because that's what James was saying. He was saying he didn't know if it was going to make a difference. He sacrificed so much and did what he did, and
but
I
what
think
did he
it was
achieve?
impactful. I think people know his name, they know what he did, they know that
He's on the record.
Famous person. And that's really important, that famous people in the media who are known and spoken about, Emma Thompson and all these people who do kind of stand up for Greenpeace and march with them, their faces are more listened, their voices and faces are more recognised and listened to.
But there's a lead. I hear you, and I don't disagree with you, but I don't think it's Idiot's Corner territory to point out that the richest 1% of humanity is responsible for more carbon emissions than the poorest 66%. So I do understand. I don't mean the sort of lazy Daily Mail nonsense about how dare Prince Harry get in an aeroplane or catch a private jet when he also cares about the environment. He's such a hypocrite. I don't mean that lazy level, but on a deeper level, on a more intelligent level, there is something hypocritical about the people you've just described taking the lead when they come from a cohort of humanity that is responsible for more carbon emissions than the poorest 66% of people on the planet.
But then they're the ones that need to act.
But they're the ones with the platform. So who else is going to have it? If you haven't got a platform, you have to glue yourself to a plane.
Exactly. And that is what has to, that's what, I know lots of people who've ended up in prison for doing amazing acts of, increasing climate awareness. And they are fantastic and they do so much, but they are not seen in the way that...
And they're never going to be. And there it is. There is the question. Why did you do that? Why did you glue yourself to a plane? Why did you climb the Dartford crossing? Because I can. And I don't have a platform of anything like sufficient scale to make these points in a way that doesn't involve breaking the law and compromising my own liberty. Thank you, Rachel. It's the weirdest question I ever ask you. It's a bit self-referential, but it's sincere. Why? Why did people who understand, myself included, the severity of the climate crisis, the urgency of the need for change, not feel it more deeply? Quite often when we have this conversation, or variations of it, you send me a reference to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm not sure it works as well as you think it does. If you don't know what Maslow posited, it's a sort of pyramid of priorities. The things that you need to have in place before you can start caring about other things. So it starts with physiological needs, breathing, air, food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep, the things that will kill you if you don't have them, or at least severely compromise your existence. And once you've got those in place, you can move on to what he calls safety and security, and that would be health, employment, property, family, and social ability. But I wonder where the climate crisis would sit on this. Would it not sit in safety? And well, I suppose it's in the short term, isn't it? It's in the now. It's in the moment. Have I got food? Yes, right. Am I safe? Yes, right. Then you move on to love and belonging. It's the third priority, working up from necessity. Love and belonging. So that's friendship, family, a sense of connection. I think we give that to each other on this show, actually, if I was going to get soppy for a minute. Obviously, be getting it from other areas as well, ideally, but I think most mornings we probably get a sense of friendship, family, intimacy, a sense of connection from each other on the radio. I do, anyway. And then self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, the need to be a unique individual. I suspect a lot of people don't get there. They're too busy, they're expending so much energy on the first three, the physiological needs, the safety and security, the love and belonging. You don't find the time to focus on self-esteem, to focus on respect of others, or the need to be a unique individual, the temptation to be part of a faceless herd, ranting and raving about whatever it is you've been invited to rant and rave about today is almost irresistible. And then finally, self-actualization, or, to use a modern description of that, being woke. Because self-actualization involves morality, creativity, spontaneity, acceptance, purpose, meaning, inner potential, being bigger than you are, in a way, being dedicated to things other than your own atavistic needs, your own base appetites, being dedicated to the pursuit of good, as it were, or the greater good. So where does the climate fit in on any of that? Because it's a safety and security issue, but it's somehow too distant. It's a love and belonging issue, but it doesn't feel like that. It's not really a self-esteem issue, although it should be. Respect of others should entail protection of planet. And then self-actualization, morality, purpose, all of those things. Maybe it is just a self-actualization issue, because that's why the question today is personal. Why don't I care more? Why don't I care enough? 10:40 is the time. Nick's in Crystal Palace. Nick, what would you like to say?
Well, James, first of all, thank you so much for being so brave and generous.
It's not brave, it's honest.
Like
thank you, but I appreciate that, but I'm not going to take that compliment today. Cheers, though.
I would say one of the things is I think you actually care more than you might think or feel that you do, which is why you're even asking this question in the first place.
Maybe.
But the reason why that just sort of doesn't land, as you would say,
yes,
there are many reasons, and I do think I'm so glad that you talked about self-actualization and recognition amongst people, because that has a tremendous amount to do with it. There's two basic, I think, general categories of reasons why you, or even I sometimes, might not care enough. We, on one hand, the simplest of those to talk about is that the reality is just so awful. We would rather awful realities like this be negotiable.
Yeah.
But they unfortunately are objective. And so our beliefs sometimes get in the way of actualizing an eco-cultural identification
Right.
with ourselves.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a tremendously hard thing to do, especially if you think you have to do it all by yourself. And unfortunately, our politics nowadays are very different from when I was growing up, even as lately as the 90s in the Pacific Northwest, where I'm partly from, in the U.S. There was a tremendous upswelling of ecological consciousness and activism.
There was, wasn't there?
Yeah, and it got chilled.
Why?
Very, very, so many different things happened. Sociocultural priorities got in the way of ecocultural priorities.
Okay.
Basically.
But that's a hierarchy of needs, isn't it, essentially?
I don't think the hierarchy of needs, it is. But
no, a hierarchy, not necessarily Maslow's, or a hierarchy of focus, interest.
Yeah, hierarchy of momentary focus, because you have to remember any of these hierarchies are going to be massively subjective.
Yes, of course.
There's no objective hierarchy. It's going to depend on where you're from and what your situation is. But I don't think it has as much to do with how much money you make.
No.
It may have to do with class in another sense, in that, there are things that certain respectable people of certain descriptions aren't allowed to care about, and other people who have a little bit more leeway. But so that's one half of it that I spoke of. The other half is a lot more deeper, historical, anthropological, sociological. Basically, for about 200 years, our culture, our sort of collective philosophy, groupthink, has been to separate nature from culture. You've got culture over here on the human side and nature over there everywhere else, and it's very easy to sort of relegate the non-human to the background. The non-human environment is a background stage, and of course it becomes psychologically very comfortable to think in those terms. I mean, this is the psychology of self-protection again, isn't it? Is I don't want to go there because it's too terrifying. And if you do go there, you end up gluing yourself to a plane. It's too terrifying, and also politically, we've become much more atomized and much more socio-culturally identified, and we're so busy clinging on to our socio-cultural identities that we can't envision the communalist social movement that's going to make acting against climate change easier for us all on an individual level.
And so that boils down to, what's the point of me doing recycling when yada yada China yada, or what? I mean, is looking for the excuse not to do anything.
Or not just China, my neighbor.
No, well, exactly, yes. Or
it's everybody.
Prince Harry.
If we had more of a collective culture of ecological consciousness, something like what you would have in a union, a trade union mentality.
Collective bargaining.
Of course we're all, collective bargaining. Of course, collective ecology. Of course we're all going to strike together. Of course we're not going to let, so it's
bystander effect as well. God, we're dropping the psychological references very liberally this morning, but it's a bit of bystander effect as well. If someone goes first and manages, like Greta Thunberg, I suppose, she can she can motivate and inspire behaviour that people wouldn't have undertaken independently or in her absence.
And in order to understand better why you might not care as much as you want to, the fact that you want to means that you kind of do. But the reason why you might not as much as you want to might better be answered if we focus on why does Greta Thunberg doesn't have to do this.
No, of course not.
She, and I didn't have to spend my undergrad studying ecological agriculture. I didn't have to come all the way to London to study ecology, culture, and society in a master's program. It wasn't just that I could. I had to borrow money heavily to do this.
Yeah.
All this stuff is, well, I felt like, for me, it was like I couldn't. I couldn't not do anything.
You couldn't
else.
not.
I just wasn't interested in anything else enough.
And there it is. That's the urgency that you either get or you don't get. And even if you understand, you don't feel that urgency. And it is a feeling. It's a feeling built upon rational understanding. It's not a sort of random emotional dopamine hit. It is genuine, intellectually sound reasoning. But two people can have the same intellectually sound reasoning. One of them feels Nick's sense of urgency or Greta Thunberg's sense of urgency, and another one, the majority of us, don't. It's weird. It's genuinely weird.